I'd like to dedicate this reflection to a wonderful and wise woman who is with us today, my longtime friend and godmother of my son Robin, Griselda Vega, originally from Argentina, now for many years living in Toronto. Welcome, Griselda. First, a quote. On January the 6th, 1990, a public vigil took place for the remains of Marcelo Hellman. But before, his mother Berta Shubarov asked to say goodbye to him alone. Behind closed doors in the offices of the Argentinian Forensic Anthropology team, 13 years after having seen him for the last time, she kissed the bones of the fruit of her womb. I want to begin this reflection by asking each of you to pause for a moment to remember the last person, apart from those you live with or who are part of your bubble, the last person that you touched. Can you remember that moment? Who was it you touched? How did it feel? Hold that person in your mind's eye and in your heart. Over the past year, with two brief exceptions, the only person I have touched is my 16-year-old son, Robin. I ask daily for a hug that is at times given grudgingly. Did I mention he's 16? But from time to time, he asks me for a hug. I am ever so grateful for his hugs, for his touch. We all need touch. It is part of our DNA, part of the human condition. We are born to touch. Touch of our mother's skin on our skin as we emerge into the world. And we express our love for one another, for children, parents, friends, lovers, strangers, through not only words, but touch. Sometimes when words fail, it is touch that speaks. In a deeply moving account of the aftermath of his young adult son's death, American theologian Nicholas Walterstorff wrote, "Now at the end, with these hands, I touch him in his coffin." Seeing and touching was also a way of taking leave. I knew Eric through his body. In touching the place of his dwelling, I took leave of him. Just as in touching him in his crib, I welcomed him to life. Greeting and leave-taking go best, I think, when we do them with our hands. Today is Maundy Thursday. By the time we gather again in 2 weeks, we will have journeyed with Jesus and his followers through the narrative of Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, and beyond. Like the Christmas narrative that we celebrate year by year, the narrative of the coming days is a knitting together of 4 different stories, 4 Gospels. But touch is everywhere in those stories. Today we heard Valerie read the story from the Gospel of John, in which Jesus touches and washes the feet of his disciples, a job usually relegated to a household servant or slave. And then he mandates them. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. We heard that mandate echoed in the reading from the first letter of John that Rachel Carnegie reflected on with us 2 weeks ago. That powerful story appears only in John. In all 4 Gospels, we meet Joseph of Arimathea, the first undertaker, who takes Jesus' body down from the cross, wraps it in linen cloths, and lays it in a rock-hewn tomb. In John, he is joined by Nicodemus, who brings spices to be wrapped with the body. In all 4 Gospels, it is the women, the women who stayed near the cross, who accompanied Joseph of Arimathea to the tomb, the women who, unlike the disciples, did not flee, the women who come to the tomb in the morning following the Sabbath, bringing spices to anoint Jesus' body. In Matthew, they meet Jesus and touch his feet. This year, the story we will hear read on Easter Sunday comes from the Gospel of Mark. Biblical scholars believe that the Gospel has a tacked-on ending, that in fact it ends, as we will hear on Sunday, with the women terrified, fleeing before a young man in a white robe who tells them Jesus has risen from the dead. No appearance of Jesus, no body to touch and anoint. Habeas corpus. Literally, you have the body, turns to who has the body. Habeas corpus. It's an important legal concept, and as I learned over 20 years of working in Latin America, 10 of them on behalf of PWRDF, it defined the work of so many, especially women. The mothers and grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo in Argentina, the National Coordination of Guatemalan Widows, and the Center for Women's Human Rights in Chihuahua, Mexico, to name a few. In the face of violence, they bravely demanded of dictators and repressive regimes, habeas corpus. You have the bodies of our husbands, sons, daughters, lovers, parents. Now return those bodies to us. In the 2000s, PWRDF played an important role in accompanying the newly formed Center for Women's Human Rights in the northern Mexican state of Chihuahua. The seed money and subsequent modest grants we provided supported the center to the point where it now has an international profile and support. During Holy Week of 2008, I was privileged to meet two members of the world-renowned Argentinian forensic anthropology team in Ciudad Juarez on the Mexico-US border. Since its founding in 1984, the team has carried out exhumations and identification of the remains of thousands of victims of human rights atrocities around the world. Through the active lobbying of the Women's Human Rights Center, Mercedes Dorretti and Sofia Egaña first came to Ciudad Juarez in 2004 to begin work to identify the remains of some 450 women brutally murdered over the previous decade in that border city of maquila, migration, and drug trafficking, and in Ciudad Juarez to the south. The team has always placed central importance on working closely with organizations in the country where the exhumations and identification takes place. Alma Gomez, a veteran social activist and founding member of the Center for Women's Human Rights, was therefore seconded to work with Mercedes and Sofia, assisting in the detailed review of the mountain of legal documents of the mostly unresolved cases of the murdered women, and helping to locate and accompany family members of over 80 victims. Indeed, another essential tenet of the team's mission has been to not only work, but to form a relationship with the families of the victims. Mercedes explained to me, "If a family member doesn't wish to receive the remains, we don't intervene," she said. "We have never done something that the family doesn't want." But even when it is painful to receive the news of an identification, it is also restorative. For us, it is unthinkable that the person who studies the remains hasn't also carried out an interview with the family, gone to the field to recover the remains, and been responsible for handing them over to the family. We have always done this. Habeas corpus. On the second Sunday of Easter, we will hear the story found in Luke and John of Jesus' appearance to the disciples. In both stories, he appears not in resurrected wholeness, but wounded, showing them his hands, feet, and side. Only in John do we have the story where we will hear of his interaction with Thomas. Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe. Thomas answered him, My Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet come to believe. PWRDF's stated mission is towards a truly just, healthy, and peaceful world. We are called through our baptismal covenant and the marks of mission to reach out and touch a wounded world. For over 60 years, we, PWRDF supporters, volunteers, staff, Anglicans, have accompanied our partners who have touched a wounded Jesus in communities throughout the world. In so doing, we have borne witness to a resurrected and wounded Christ. We have sought to live out the mandate, the mandatum of Maundy Thursday. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. I began this reflection with a quote from an essay in the Mexican magazine Gato Pardo titled El rastro de los huesos, the sign in the bones. Written at the time I met Mercedes and Sofia in 2008, the article profiled the history and work of the Argentinian forensic anthropology team. Marcelo Hellman was the son of renowned Argentinian poet Juan Hellman and his wife, Berta Schuberov. In 1976, 20-year-old Marcelo was disappeared, together with his 19-year-old wife, Maria Claudia Irureta, by the Argentinian dictatorship. On January the 6th, 1990, a public vigil took place for the remains of Marcelo Hellman. But before, his mother Berta Schuberov asked to say goodbye to him alone. Behind closed doors, in the offices of the Argentinian forensic anthropology team, 13 years after seeing him for the last time, she kissed the bones of the fruit of her womb. I invite you once again to hold in your heart the person you thought of at the beginning of this reflection. The person you touched in the time before COVID mandated physical distancing, masks, lockdowns, quarantines. Imagine touching them again, of hugging them, holding them close. Touch. Habeas corpus. They are the Easter stories. A blessed Easter to each of you. Amen.